Hey, welcome back. My name is Jonathan McHugh, and we're here at Loyola University, College of Music and Media, for our podcast Fridays OffBeat, where we bring in some of the greatest artists in New Orleans playing and singing for you that you might know, but this is where you get to know them a little better. And I'm lucky enough to bring in my buddy Klein, we'll talk about all the stuff he's done. Thanks for coming in, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
So we were just talking about how we met, and it was after Katrina. I brought an artist down here who was the Grammy poster artist, Robert Sturman, and we did a series of work which we called Time Zero, where he had this really interesting old German Polaroid film which would stay wet for a long time, and he would take it out of the camera and he would literally take a big pen cap and he would mark it up. You can take a look at some of these images because they're pretty special. And we did a thing, Quint gave us a great display at Jazz Fest. We displayed at Jazz Fest the work, and we were the cover of OffBeat magazine with Dr. John. And that's how we met, and you had a really cool bumper sticker called Renew New Orleans, I think it was, or Re New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And that was how we first met. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, absolutely, I sure do. Well, shortly after Katrina, we were playing with the Storyville Stompers at outside K. Paul's restaurant, and it was just shortly after. Wasn't much going on. A few places opened up, and we would play on the street as people would go in, and it was pretty quiet at that time. And I remember Ben Jaffe walking by. Hey, how y'all doing? Here's some stickers.
Oh, that
Gave
was a
me
Ben
the
Jaffe
sticker. Yeah, that came from
Wow.
Preservation Hall. That was Jaffe's sticker. I stuck it on the bell right there. I kind of thought, okay, let's make an announcement here. Let people know, you know.
Yeah, we got the legends: Toussaint, Fats Domino, Dr. John, Art Neville, Trombone Shorty. You know, we just got Toussaint. Incredible mix of things. We should bring that back for the 20th anniversary. So, you've been at this a while now.
I've been playing trombone for a while, since fourth grade.
Fourth grade. And when you were a teenager, I know that, you know, all your friends would go to Bourbon Street and hang out, but you would kind of make a turn off Bourbon Street because there was some music playing down the road that you liked to listen to. Talk about that experience for you.
Yeah, I was born in 1960, right? So in the 70s, when you were a teenager, the drinking age was 18. So you could get fake IDs easily. We would just doctor our learner's permit. You know, it was
things were easier back then.
Yeah, easy. It was a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And we would go to the French Quarter because as kids, my parents brought us to the Quarter, so I knew the Quarter. But there was music on Bourbon Street, really good music. Not that the music there today is not really good music, but it's not indicative of Louisiana or New Orleans. Right. Not much. And most of the music at that time was just, was spilling out the doors of New Orleans, rhythm and blues, jazz, early rock and roll, meters were there. And we would go to the French Quarter just to hang, you know, and we would go to Pat O'Brien's and get a Hurricane. And right next to Pat O'Brien's is Preservation Hall. And I remember walking by there one time and hearing this music come out of the hall. These shutters, they would open the shutters behind the drums, which they no longer do now. So you could stand there and look in. I'm standing there looking in going, wow, what's going on here? It was like a dream. Every once in a while, if I had an extra $3, I would go in and stand in the back. So that was my first experience to some real old school, traditional New Orleans music.
And did that lead you to get involved with the Storyville Stompers? Where did they come into the equation?
Okay, the Storyville Stompers started in 1981. It came out of a group called the Paradise Tumblers, like paradise that you roll the dice. Tumblers, and they were a group of friends that was put together by Wesley Schmidt and some other people that used to hang out at a place called Luigi's.
You talking about Luigi's by the Lake?
Luigi's by the Lake
Radiators
front.
we used to go out there.
The Radiators
Oh
played on Wednesdays.
Yes, sir.
For all the beer you could drink, no cover charge. Wesley was the manager of Luigi's, and so this was my first introduction to the Radiators and just hanging out. Well, Wesley had this group called the Tumblers, and it was just a free-for-all, fun. No, they knew they weren't really musicians. They knew 4 songs, and they would start at the Dream Palace, which is the Blue Nile right now, on Frenchman Street, and they would just meander through the French Quarter, stopping at bars, creating havoc, causing traffic problems, and just having a whole bunch of fun. It was buku fun. And my Uncle Jerry asked me to come play in that. Jerry is my uncle who's 7 years older than me, and he's a trombone player. So I came up watching him. That's why I played trombone.
So he was a big influence.
He was the big influence, for absolutely was the big influence.
Right. We'll talk about in the music business about how important it is, or it used to be, you couldn't get in the business without an uncle in the business. You literally had an uncle who was a trombonist, and you became a career trombonist.
Yeah,
right?
watching him.
Watching him, yeah. So in the Stompers, so this is a big record, right? That was done in '86, produced by Milton Baptiste. Talk about Milton's influence and what he was to you guys.
Well, one of the guys in the Tumblers, once some real musicians started coming and playing with the Tumblers, just because they knew it was so much fun.
Right.
This guy named Larry Tellerico, his nickname was Rico. He saw a market. He said, "Wow, you know, there's something that's going on here. I'm going to pick 6 musicians from here. We're going to start our own little band called the Storyville Stompers." And that's what we didn't pull out of the Tumblers, but we sort of stepped away and became a bit more professional. Now, the Olympia Brass Band was the top brass band at that time. They go way back to the early 1900s, the Olympias. A very important New Orleans brass band. They did a lot of really great things. So they were our influence. Because Woody and Rico and these guys, they were a bit older than I, they had already been following the Olympia. So I got turned on to the Olympia through them. Chasing after the Olympia, we modeled ourselves after the Olympia with our uniforms and our hats and just looking like that. Became friends with them, and Milton Baptiste was the co-leader, trumpet player of the Olympia Brass Band. Very well known in the brass band world. You mention his name to anybody in New Orleans that's been around, especially in the brass band scene, they know Milton. And
is that part of the Baptiste family, like John Baptiste comes from, or different?
Maybe, but not directly. It's
not
different.
close.
There's a lot of Baptiste in
Exactly.
New Orleans. So Milton produced this record for us and played on the record, and it felt like it was a validation. Okay, we're in the right direction. Now, when I listen back to it, the music is really fast and it doesn't groove like we do now. It takes time to learn those kind of things.
Ago, bro. You got to give yourself a break.
This is 1986.
And you guys, so this group has been going that long?
Since
for
1981 is when we started.
That's incredible.
I think it's October, and one of the guys has it written down, our first performance, our first gig. So we're coming up on 44 years now.
I mean, to have that level of continuity is crazy, and you obviously have a number of bands that you've been in that have that kind of, but today, how often do you play? What's the gigs like today with the Stompers?
Yeah, the band has been active, completely active, like really active. And at one point at some point there weren't many brass bands around town. And we were getting a whole bunch. Sometimes we'd have 2 or 3 gigs a day. You know, we called it the A, B, and C band.
Oh, because you could morph into different bands if you need to.
We were just
demand is there.
Yeah, the demand was there. We called and hired other bands.
Amazing.
Now there's probably 100 brass bands in town,
yes.
Maybe more. But this band has been active since 1981.
Wow.
Yeah, and except for given the pandemic and things like that. But we play a fair amount of time.
That's great. And then also the Jazz Vipers. Talk about them. What that's been like for you. This is another band that you've been involved with a while, right?
Yeah, the Vipers it's a band made up of acoustic bass, acoustic guitar, piano, and then there's trombone, alto saxophone, tenor sax who doubles on clarinet. So it's 3 horns in the front, 3 rhythm in the back, no drums. And Joe Braun started this band probably 25 years ago or so. And it's based more off of like an old sort of Count Basie Kansas City swing thing as opposed to New Orleans kind of thing. The New Orleans element is in it just because we're here. But the band is more of a swing kind of band for dancers, swing dance kind of things. And we play every Monday night at the Royal Frenchman.
How long's that gig been going on?
Oh, well, the Vipers, Joe started this band, and they were playing every Monday night at the Spotty Cat when he started 25 years ago. So we left Spotty Cat, about 5 or 6 years ago, and now we're at the Royal Frenchman.
Which is a great venue.
Yeah, it's a great venue, and it's really a lot of fun. We get really some superb swing dancers that come out there, professional level dancers.
Right, so
it's,
they know they booked the calendar based on
Yeah.
that gig, and they come out, they know they're going to get their groove on.
they
You
know,
guys
and they
playing.
know they like this music, so they come out and they know
Right.
they can dance.
It's a very
to this.
specific thing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's super cool. I also think that Molly Reeves, a guitarist, did the artwork too, right? That's pretty
Yeah, our
dope.
guitar player Molly Reeves is not only a fantastic guitar player, but she's an artist, and
It's very cool.
she's done almost at least the last 3 records or so that we've done.
Amazing. So,
Yeah.
okay, so that's 2 you got going. Then when I met you, you were in the band Bonorama, and talk about their journey and where you guys parted company and what that was like.
Well, Mark Mullins and I were in Harry Connick Jr.'s band, and we started with Harry in 1990. Toured all over the whole world. We would be on the road sometimes 2 or 3 weeks at a time, sometimes longer, then we'd be off for weeks at a time. So when we were home, we were all going back into our bands that we were playing in. But one day, while we were in New York, it was a Monday night, one of the guys in Harry's band who lived in New York said, "You should go to the Village Gate," which was it's called Poisson Rouge now, but it was a very well-known club in Greenwich Village. As he says, there's a Latin band with 5 trombones, and every Monday night at the Village Gate was salsa meets jazz. So it was a salsa band with a jazz musician, and this was the salsa band Libre. I think they're from Puerto Rico, but they were featuring Ronnie Cuba. And I walked in, and I still can see it. You know, I get chills when I think about it. And I walked in, and there was, of course, the band, but the horn section was 5 trombones.
Up front.
Yeah, you know, they weren't up front because in those bands, the singers are up front.
Right.
The trombones were the horn section in the back.
New Orleans, they'd be up
But yeah, you know this already. But the sound of it, it just floored me, and I was like, wow, this is so amazing. So that night, I went back to my hotel, and I had a dream to start a New Orleans band featuring the trombones up front. You know, the idea was don't be relegated to the horn section in the back.
Right,
Let's
which is
move up
mostly
to
where
the
the horn
front.
section is.
Yeah, the horn
right?
section's always in the back. We're
Right.
just an added on thing to
flavor,
the music. But I had the idea, let's make this the sound of the band. So I talked to Mark Mullins, and we took it and we ran with it. We started the band, and it was quite successful, and it ran and it did its thing, and we made quite a few records. It started going into the rock. It was always.
You made the Zeppelin record, right? Which is, you know, Bonorama plays Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
which is, you know, again, that's my favorite all-time band, Led Zeppelin. So for me, I was like, whoa, this is dope. You hear this, you know, this music, Zeppelin music in a different context where the trombones are leading and they're the guitar licks or the trombones, and it's like, wow.
Every day I try to do all those things the best I can.
So anyway, but that for you, because you're a traditional guy and you've been living this world with these groups and Preservation Hall, it didn't feel that you wanted to go that way.
Well, it was pulling me that way. Even in the beginning, one of the first arrangements we had. Mark is an arranger. Mark Mullins is a great arranger, a great writer. He arranged. We had Frankenstein was one of the first tunes we did.
Edgar
Winter.
Edgar Winter.
Yeah, and it was a big
that
epic
must have been killer,
drum
right?
solo.
Because brass bands always have done great covers, whether it's Casanova or all these great New Orleans, non-New Orleans records that were done by New Orleans brass bands,
Yeah.
right? So you guys did some rock stuff, right?
We did the rock stuff. Mark was more of the rock. I was not a rock. I'm not even a fan of rock because there aren't many trombones in rock bands.
Right.
So there's more trombones in funk bands. The
Right,
white
correct.
bands don't have trombones in them much. The black bands
Right.
do. I chased after the
Right.
black American music.
Sure.
I went that way. It was more fun. You can move to it. You know, rock music, you got to bounce your head up and down.
Right.
Funk music, you can move your whole body to.
True.
So when the band it was always a rock band mixed with funk and mixed with New Orleans
Right.
stuff. And then the Led Zeppelin thing came up. We did a show or two for somebody commissioned us to do a whole Led Zeppelin show featuring Randy Jackson from Zebra.
Wow.
It was pretty cool. We did that, so we had this whole repertoire of Zeppelin arrangements, and we'd pull them out every once in a while. And when it was time to do a record, we said, let's do a Led Zeppelin record. And we did Mullins and Perrine. Matt Perrine did most of the arrangements on there, stellar arrangements. They twisted them up. Some of the tunes are even in funk grooves. So it was.
The Zeppelin cover, "The Ocean," is by far their biggest, Bonorama's biggest record. On Spotify, like 2 million.
Is it? Yeah.
2 million. But obviously, and then also our Loyola grad, his son Michael, who's got his own band Zeta, who's fantastic, and he's done a bunch of stuff for me on the film and TV side. He's got a bunch of music placements, like covering stuff like Mississippi Queen. He's obviously versed in that thing, so he takes that thing over, and him and his dad together. It's really kind of nice to watch. That they have that rock trombone thing together. But then you also had a very large dormant band, large in many ways, the Nightcrawlers, that would only come together so often, right? Talk about the New Orleans Nightcrawlers.
Right. Well, the Nightcrawlers, we started in 1994. It was just started by Matt Perrine, Kevin Clark, and Tom McDermott. They had some arrangements that they had written, and they just wanted to call some musicians to hear their arrangements played. So it was more like a rehearsal band. No name, no motive, nothing. We had no, ideas of that we're going to take this anywhere.
Sure.
And we would rehearse and get together and practice, blow through these charts at these guys' rates. Some they were writing more, and it started sounding good. And we said, let's make a recording. We did. In the band, when we went in to record the band at the Toulouse Theater one morning, we said, let's hire an engineer, set his stuff up at the theater there, because it's a great venue. And when we walked in at 10 o'clock in the morning, the manager of the club says, "What are y'all doing here? Y'all are Nightcrawlers, at this morning time."
And the band is named
The
right
band
there.
was named right there.
there.
We
That's
said
a
it.
great
That's
story.
okay. That's the name. And that band has always been very near and dear to me because it's a brass band, and I love brass band. And we do play traditional. We can play traditional, but it's more of an original music, also with some covers. And I've always liked that being in a band that can play some original stuff, mix it up. We were heavily influenced by the Dirty Dozen, who influenced most of these new brass bands that's happening now. I would have to say all of them, really.
Right.
And we would in the beginning, we just would play a little bit. We'd play at the Maple Leaf. It'd be funny because we'd play at the Maple Leaf and we'd all bring music stands. We had the music stand right there. We all reading the music because the music is complex. It's the music that the Nightcrawlers play. Some of it is way, complex.
Right.
So we did have to read our charts at the beginning. We've pretty much, we don't do that now. We don't bring the music on the stand. We know our music. Now, some of that older music that we haven't played in a lot of years, we don't really know that.
Right.
We'd have to go back and learn it.
So in taking us to, a couple years back, you made this record, Atmosphere, which has a big sticker on it, which is cool, that says Grammy winner. Talk about making this record and obviously the process of the Grammy thing, which is where we came back together on, because you called me and said, "Hey man, I'm submitting this record, do you want to help talk to your people?" And I hadn't heard the record, and I was like, "All right, yeah, send it to me." And I was like, "Oh shit, that's really good, man. It's Gentilly groove, Googa Mooga, I loved it." It's and you covered obviously our boy Harry Shearer's track, Big Bottom from Spinal Tap, which is legendary.
Yeah.
So talk about the process of getting into the Grammy lane and actually getting nominated and then winning.
Mm-hmm. Well, with the Nightcrawlers, we've always, every few years, we'd make a record. Just because we'd have all this music, let's make a record. Just because we wanted to document where we were. And this was, I think, our 6th or 7th record that we had put out in all of those years. Sometimes the Nightcrawlers would only play 2 shows a year, French Quarter Fest and Jazz Fest.
Gonna be like the Radiators, huh?
Yeah.
Just a few a year.
Well, we didn't break up. We have 10 people in the band, and everybody is a first call on a lot of different levels. So everybody's moving around. It would be hard to put sometimes it's still hard to put a Nightcrawler's show, rehearsal, recording session, whatever together. We need like a Supreme Court ruling to get this band in, you know. Anyway, we'd make records. We decided, let's make this record, and we had these songs. We recorded it, and all of our records are good. You know, I'm not trying to say, but you know, I'm bragging on our stuff, but we put out.
You know how to do it by now. You've been doing this long enough that you know what sounds good. You have great arrangers. You know, Matt and you really help, and everybody does their part. And you're right. You're making records that sound strong.
Yeah. So we put this one out, and somebody, Kevin Clark, our trumpet player, sent it to Scott Billington, who produced 2 of our records when we were on Rounder Records.
Right.
Scott's a great person. He's just a
Great producer.
Great producer all
Big friend of
around.
New Orleans.
Yes, indeed. He heard it and he said, "Wow, this sounds great. You should put it in the mix for a Grammy nomination." So that got put in the list.
Sure.
In the preliminary list, of course, there's hundreds of records
Yes.
that are just in each category has hundreds of records. It got nominated, and we were all excited about that. I thought we had already just
well,
get
the nomination's
nominated
the win.
was a win.
Right.
You
and,
know,
then,
that's
and then we talked, and I was like, well, hey, what are you doing on Grammy Day? You're like, we got a gig. I was like, you got a gig? Because nobody's got a gig. It's the middle of February. It's the middle of COVID. Everybody's going to be on their couches like, thanks. I was like, dude, if you got a gig, get a film crew and make it pop.
Yeah.
And so talk about that day and how that worked out.
Well, because it was pandemic, they didn't have a Grammy celebration that year. So the idea was you take your computer, you sit down on Grammy Day, and as you know, the Grammys start at 12:30 during the day because they're all.
The pre-tell, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of categories involved, 80 or so.
80 categories, right.
So the ones we see on TV are the top 5 or 6 or so, or the top ones. They say your category is going to be read at like 3:30. So whoever's you know what time if you're nominated, you know you're sitting in front of your computer.
You're ready.
You're ready. If you win, you have 30 seconds, they say, to make an acceptance speech. But we wanted to do something fun, you know. It was how do we do this? Okay, well, the Broadside was just
outdoor venue.
and in New Orleans we were already playing on porches. We were doing outdoor stuff during pandemic anyway. We do that even when it's not pandemic.
Right.
So there was also another band nominated in the same category, which the category was Regional Roots Album, and it was Cameron Dupree. He's a Cajun musician. So he was also in the category, and he and his band lives here in New Orleans. So I called Cameron. I said, Cameron, I presented this idea. Let's have a show, both bands at the Broadside, and when it's time for our category to be read, we're both on both sides of the stage. The stage is set. All of our friends and family are here, and we whoever wins, the other band takes the stage first, and because at that point you have to go do the Grammys want you to go do some press things. So whoever wins goes in, does their press thing. The other band plays, and we come out. We play together and hand it off to the other band. And so there we are on one side of the stage, and Cameron and his band on the other side of the stage, and the computers are facing back toward the audience, and the audience is behind us. And the film crew's there filming us on it. And when they announced our name, it was surreal. It was like, wow.
You know, a little deer in the headlights look.
Oh, we're even more deer in the headlights. Like, wow. You know, it was just such an honor to have that.
Yeah, it was great. It was really, because everybody else is, like I said, it's just in the middle of the pandemic, February, it's not really nice in most weather in the country, but here, it was a beautiful sunny day in New Orleans.
It was beautiful. And you know what, when you go to the Grammys, you can't take your family with you.
Yeah.
You know.
Right, your family was all there.
Everybody's family was there
amazing.
with us, so it was.
Yeah, and that's what to me, a Grammy, I tell people, like, it matters, right? And we'll obviously talk about Fat Man in a second, but the aspect of, you know, getting people that excited and, you know, what it does for your business, you can, you know, you're always going to be a Grammy winner. It's never going to be taken away from you. And it's a level of success, right? And musical success judged by your peers. And going back, Tanio was a guy that was in, I think it was a New Breed brass band.
New Birth.
New Birth. And so when I produced my first movie, Britney Spears' movie Crossroads, I was able to make it so we shot in New Orleans and we shot in Kentwood where Britney grew up, Louisiana, but they were talking about using library. I was like, no, we're going to use real New Orleans brass bands on Bourbon Street. And somehow I got to Tanio and New Breed, and they're in that movie. They're in the Britney Spears movie performing. So it was good to reconnect with Tanio, and we'll talk about that in a second. But obviously working with Fat Man, who obviously tragically got killed on Mardi Gras Day in a car car accident. Talk about him and the whole experience for you of dealing with that loss coming into this record, this new record.
Well, when we first started the Nightcrawlers, I might have been one of the only guys that had already been playing in the brass band. I was already in the brass band world. And when Matt and Tom and them, when they called the musicians they wanted to call to play these arrangements, they had these two other drummers that were not from New Orleans, didn't really know, and it was okay. But I knew immediately we need some real New Orleans drummers in here. And then at some point down the line, I was able to get Tanio and Fat Man in. Tanio is Tanio Hingle. He plays the bass drum. And Kerry Hunter, his nickname is Fat Man. He's the snare drummer. So once those guys came in, the groove got real. And it got really good. And the arrangements that we were already playing, good arrangements,
right,
that just put that little
extra
roux
special.
underneath
Yeah,
it.
right.
That was the roux that just kind of.
Exactly. You need that.
You need that. That's you have to have that rhythm that comes directly from Africa.
Right.
And that we have here in New Orleans, and it's nowhere else in the U.S. It still has that African influence. You understand?
And obviously, Fat Man passing was extremely tragic, right in the middle of Mardi Gras. And his funeral that I went to, jazz funeral that you guys presided, was amazing to see that. You realize, and when his obituary is Grammy Award winner, and it's just so good. I never even thought about it all in the context. I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad you guys won a Grammy. But what that does legacy-wise, it's like a whole different level of things.
It really made me aware of the legacy that Fat Man left.
Powerful thing.
I mean, they had his coffin wrapped. You saw it wrapped with a Grammy on the front and the back, and his name on it, and it was like. But this is what we do in New Orleans. This is when a musician passes, or somebody very important, musicians will show up to honor that person's life. And that's what those jazz funerals are about. We honor his life.
And that one was particularly rich with people, as far as how many different musicians do you think were playing at that funeral that day?
Somebody guessed 150 musicians. It split up into two bands at some point, not by design. It just happened. It was too many people in one. Right. Some musicians got to the back of the procession.
There were like 2 second lines.
It was two big bands going on. Yeah, so it was.
James Andrews was out there trying to.
He leads. James always leads.
He does.
One. Yeah, he's a good leader. Take it to the street. James is gonna take.
It was fascinating to watch. It was sad and happy all at the same time.
Yeah.
So anyway, on this record we came back together because Tanio had written an anthem for the Pelicans, right? Smooth Like a Pelican. I was like, hey, what if we take this and we add some hip hop flavor to it? You're like, let's go. And then I said, here's this guy, Basie Bob, who I'd met in LA, who had moved back to New Orleans, who's a Grammy-winning engineer, producer. And we all came together and we just worked at making this record, this Smooth Like a Pelican remix coming together. On this record, Too Much to Hold. So for you, again, you're a traditionalist, right? You play traditional music, but you are also open to do some different stuff. So talk about the creation of Smooth Like a Pelican, what your thoughts were in keeping your traditional base, but also expanding.
Well, what we did here, we wanted to follow up the Grammy record with another one, while you're still kind of, okay, so this was 2 years after we won the Grammy. We recorded.
21 you won the Grammy, right?
2020, yeah. 2020, you get it in 21.
Right.
So we had some songs, and let's go in the studio and record these. So we had all of these songs recorded, and I played you the Smooth Like a
And
Pelican.
I remember I was walking on the beach in Santa Monica. I actually don't remember anything in life, but I remember listening to this song and hitting it again and hitting it again. I was like, this has got some serious groove to it. And if you could actually add some like hip hop element to it, you know, maybe this is a record that's played at the Pelicans games. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's really interesting how it came together, and we sent it to Alfred Banks, you know, Hassizzle and Pell, and they were like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Then you were also able to come up with a grant from the Threadhead Foundation, who I'd like you to talk about for a second, because you've done a bunch of stuff with them. Chris Joseph is a guy I know from Santa Monica who's been just a great proponent of New Orleans music, and they helped fund this video, which helped get attention, which helped get a Grammy nomination. So talk about your history with the Threadheads.
Yeah, well, the Threadheads are a group of people, music fans, that would come, they still do, they come to New Orleans for Jazz Fest. And some of them would meet, you know, and they would talk, and they say, let's stay in touch with each other. So they started a thread, like a thread.
Right.
And they would, oh, we're going to be at this show, we're going to be at this show.
Like it's like the Fest Head crew.
Yeah,
Right?
it's like the Fest Head crew,
Right.
they're Threadheads.
Right.
So they met on the thread. The music was the #1 priority. They decided one year, let's have a party on Wednesday in between the festivals. Before there was a lot of stuff going on. Now there's almost, it's hard to pick a day. So they had a sort of their own little mini festivals. They had a stage set up. They had 4 or 5 bands, and it was John Boutte and Paul Sanchez, and they played together. Chris Joseph, who spearheaded this whole thing, said, why don't y'all do a record? And John and Paul said, we would love to do a record, but we don't have money to do a record. Chris Joseph that day went around to everybody and said, would you be willing to put up some money to make these guys a record?
On the spot.
On the spot. He got them the fund. They all agreed. That was the impetus. That started that little ball rolling.
Wow.
They funded that record. Then they realized, let's start
make
this
a
song
thing.
and let's
Make
make
a
a thing.
501c3.
And let's fund other records.
Right.
It's grown. I think they don't produce it. In the beginning, they would give you the money, and you would have to pay it back.
It was a loan.
So it was like a loan plus 10% to go towards any organization that you
Sure.
like. You don't have to pay it back. If you didn't pay it back, it was no big deal.
Right.
They
The
actually
loan was forgiven.
yeah, it wasn't even a loan. They didn't own the masters. They just said, here's some money.
Right, which is so rare.
It's completely rare. When somebody says, here's some money, go make a record. I don't care what you do with it. Come on,
doesn't happen.
you worked for a record
It
label.
doesn't
Would a
happen.
record label ever do
Yeah.
that?
When Chris told me the business model, I was like, why? Why wouldn't you at least own half the master? Because maybe you could get a license for a film and TV thing, and you can kick off some money, and then you can make another record.
Yeah.
You know, but
people
the altruism, the level of altruism is amazing.
1,000%. But they actually funded one of our 5th record called Slither Slice. 10 years ago, maybe more than that.
Right.
So they gave us 10 grand. We did the record. We sold our records. We paid them back, and we gave the Musicians Clinic $1,000.
Nice.
So we were really happy with that. And then they actually funded the Atmosphere record.
Right.
They gave us some money for that. And then they
So
gave
the
us
Threadheads are Grammy winners.
the Threadheads, yes. And then they gave us some money to do this video that we
Shot at tips.
graciously, came in
Yeah, that
and
was awesome.
and did an amazing
that.
thing.
That would, to me, was like coming back here was like to teach at Loyola, but being involved with the community is like that's what you want to do.
Yes,
and then
it is.
we brought some of our students on to PA on the shoot that day, so they got to experience the making of a video. And some of them was their first time ever in Tipitina's, which we shot, or the first time on a second line. So all those kind of experiences that we may take for granted, for these kids, it's all brand new.
Yeah.
Right? So we are the stewards of trying to put people in those places to like see, oh wow, this is what that is,
Yeah.
So it was great. So I'm glad that worked out. So, and then recently we came back together again because you're my first call guy. And the Jazz Fest called us up and said, hey, would you host this, because Columbia was the Jazz Fest country this year, and all these amazing artists from Columbia came in town to play, and they had this great pavilion. And so this band from Choco,
Choco.
which is like the Amazon spot of Colombia, very rural, supposedly not economically, not kind of poor. But this brass band, Rancho Aparte, came in, and they wanted them to do something. They had played before with the Hot 8, I believe, at a Womax conference before. So they asked them to do the Hot 8. The Hot 8 wasn't available. So that was like, well, okay, if you're going to use our studio, I'll put together some people, because I love doing it. And so he was my first call. Joe Cabral, who speaks fluent Spanish, was also great. Sax was not in the Colombian government's plan. This was funded by the Colombian government. But I was like, well, if their lead instruments are clarinet, and we got, I have an amazing trumpeter here named Ben Delgado, who we used, and you on trombone, and we had Morale, one of my students, on sax, who's in the Tidal Wave Brass Band. I was like, well, why not saxophone? Because sound-wise, it's kind of in the middle between clarinets and your horns, and it worked out great. And we put this thing together that you helped really kind of collaborate. You brought in Tanio and
Sean King
on drum also.
That was the key. You have to have the right drummers.
Right, you were very clear about that when we had lunch. You're like, look, I'll do this, but you got to have the real people.
Yes.
And I was like, all right, if you could actually get Tanio to show up, his guy, that's great. To talk about the experience for you.
Oh, it's always fun to collaborate, especially somebody like that you've never met before.
Right.
I mean, we listened to their songs a couple days before, like, this is cool, You show up and you put something together on the spot and make it happen. And the Colombian musicians were stellar, top notch. And as the New Orleans musicians were, we had Ben, one of your students here at Loyola, really fantastic trumpet player, who also speaks fluent Spanish.
That's right. Did turn out I forgot about that.
And we had your tuba guy, Morale, that's right, who did wonderful. And then Tanio and King. But we stood on one side, they stood on one side, and we just started playing, right? They started playing their song, we jumped in and added our stuff. And I started hearing how, okay, let's get these drums involved. We started floating back and forth on the drum stuff, and then we had a song we would play. They jumped in on what we were doing, and we just molded an arrangement of these songs.
And Unane was your idea? I don't know how that came up, but talk about Unane as a spiritual anthem, if you will, of New Orleans.
Yeah, it's a Mardi Gras Indian chant.
Right.
That a lot of the brass bands like to throw in. Well, when we had two songs, we did that, and they came together pretty quick, and they said, well, you have another one? And right off the spot, I'm looking at Tanio and King saying, what do you think, And I think King or Tanio said, Unane. Tuba guy, he knew the groove. We started playing it. We just started jamming
to them.
Yeah.
And they jump in.
They jumped in.
And that's the beauty of cultural music, like these different
right.
things coming together. And we explained to Dino, who's the lead singer, what Eliza Jane is, and how it's kind of this anthemic New Orleans, but Appalachian. It's been around since the Civil War, and it's matured and grown and gone in different. And I love the song so much. I actually named my daughter Eliza Jane, so I was happy that they accepted that idea. But then they jumped in and started riffing on I Got a Girl from Choco, or what. We don't even know what they said. We're not even sure what they said.
We made up. Remember, we wrote some verses, and then they had the rapper guy, right? Their vocalist,
Dino.
which was and he just cut loose, and we don't know what he said, but he was going at it. And I know we're gonna find out what he said.
We're looking forward to hearing that, right?
Yeah. So that was a great collaboration.
So those are the kind of things that culturally you just love doing and putting pieces together, and that's the great thing about a brass band. It rolls into a lot of different places. It can roll into hip hop. It can roll into Colombian music. It can roll into Cuban music. It can roll all over the place. It's a good roll into rock and roll, with the Bonorama, right? So, so you got a lot of balls in the air, obviously, and then you're working on your own collaboration that you do with French musicians. Talk about that and what you'll be doing this summer.
Yeah, there's a connection I have to a guy named Jerome Broussard. Jerome lives in Nantes, and he's got a couple of different bands. One of them is the Zygos, Z-Y-G-O-S brass band.
Okay.
He loves brass band music, and Jerome is also a really good. He puts things together. The French government is quite different than the U.S. government. They support art and culture more than our government does a bit. So Jerome is able to I guess he manifests these grants that the French government gives these brass bands to come to New Orleans for 10 days and get taught our culture here, get taught music. So every day there's a we do a master class in the morning for 3 hours, take a lunch break, in the evening, in the afternoon for 3 hours. They do this for 8 or 9 days straight.
Wow.
Every day. We do it at the Jazz Museum that Jerome has hooked up. And
Did you put the band together?
No, they come from France. The band is French.
Okay, but you're part of it.
No, well, this is what happened. Jerome puts these. Some of them are organized bands. Some of them are just musicians from France that he puts together.
Mm-hmm. They
They come to New Orleans. The French government pretty much pays for almost. It costs each musician 600 or 700 euros, which is equal to dollars now,
Right.
of their own money to come here. So it's basically almost a government subsidized by the French government to come here to learn our culture and our music, take it back and expand on it. So these musicians come here. Jerome hires musicians to give a master class.
Sure.
I'll give one on old school traditional. There'll be a Mardi Gras Indian to come in. There'll be drummers that come in. There'll be banjo players that come in. So that he exposes them to all of these other elements of New Orleans music by master classes. I've been doing this for 6 or 7 years or so.
And you get to go to France.
And yeah, so
Summer
about
in
3.
France better than summer here.
No, it can be. It was hot over there last summer.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But Jerome has brought me over for the last 2 summers, and I'm going again this summer as a guest with his band, the Zygos.
So you sit in with them and play.
Yeah, I'll stay with them. I'll play with him. I'll go to Bordeaux and play with some other musicians a little bit.
Amazing.
Yeah, so
It's amazing where an instrument can take you. And that's what the whole, obviously, the Trombone Shorty Foundation and the Roots of Music, all these, these foundations that help get kids instruments and get them to walk in a Mardi Gras parade and feel what that's like, and then maybe get them on stage with somebody. So it's like, it's such a different culture here where horns elsewhere are not a thing. But
Here it
they're
is.
the thing almost.
It is.
And it's the tradition moving it forward that you talked about, and you came in my New Orleans music history class and talked about it, and it was your depth of knowledge of it is amazing that you can help spread that, not only in my class, but to French musicians, for example,
Yeah.
who love New Orleans,
they
period.
love it. They eat it up.
Right.
And as a young school-age kid, when you play in the band, you already walk in these Mardi Gras parades. All of the bands.
Here you do, right.
Yeah, so in middle school, I was marching in Mardi Gras parades. We all do. Look at the Roots of Music. They're even below middle school. Some of those
Sure,
students,
little guys.
they still,
Yeah.
this is part of the scene, the culture.
Right.
The Mardi Gras parades, a part of it. But then some of those kids will move into the brass band world where you do second lines, not quite like a Mardi Gras parade, quite different. Now, what some of us older musicians are noticing is that some of the younger musicians are not keen to all of the older traditional music. They learning all the new stuff, this new stuff and the Dirty Dozen stuff. It's cool, it's grooves and it makes you dance, but there's a whole, it's not separate, it's all connected, but there's another element to why this is like this. How did this music come about? There's history to that. The old style brass bands bubbled up and morphed into this, not overnight, by younger musicians knowing this, the traditional stuff, and mixing it in with some of the newer stuff they know. The Dirty Dozen will tell you they were listening to funk and rock and whatever, bebop, so they mixed all of those elements into their music. Now, what's these younger musicians now, and some of them are very versed and professional musicians. They only play in this new music. They don't know the old traditional stuff. So there's a couple of us, Carl LeBlanc and Seva Venet and I, are starting, we're getting ready to, we're organizing as we speak, like a class or just a get together. We're going to invite some of these younger musicians to come to where we're going to be at, which will be at a church. And we're sort of modeling it after what Danny Barker did. Danny Barker started in the 1970s when he moved back from New York. He started the Fairview Baptist Church brass band because he saw that there were not young musicians involved in this old music.
Which churned out a lot of big people. Can you name some of the names?
Everybody that came out of that band, Greg Stafford, Gregory Davis from Dirty Dozen, Tuba Fats, Leroy Jones, Michael White, the Barberins, Joe Torrigamo,
Right.
everybody that
So
came.
you're going to try to move that meter forward.
Yeah.
It's a good idea, actually.
Because Danny saw there was these younger musicians weren't involved in these older,
Right.
and
because
it was
an older school traditional thing.
Totally,
And so how do you bridge that today? And what is that education process? And also, I would say, how can we at Loyola, who this is my mission, like to make sure the community knows, the students know the community and they're in the community and also are educated. And when you teach New Orleans music history today, you realize they don't know who Alan Toussaint is. They don't know who Dr. John is. They don't know who these leaders are.
Yeah.
Like, because the world moves so quickly and hip hop is the thing and that's what they focus on, right? They
Yeah.
might know who Jay-Z is. They might. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm happy to talk more about that and figure out what we can do together. And OffBeat, obviously, I'm sure would love to be involved and how we can do that together. But that's a great mission to figure out how to.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to take Danny Barker's model and grab some of these musicians that are interested in learning traditional New Orleans jazz music, because they can use all of that in what they do.
And in closing, Preservation Hall is opening up this whole nother building, which I got to see a little bit of preview the other night. That will be an education center.
Sure
so,
will.
you know, talk a little about what you know about that, because that's good. That could be a good, perfect spot for that, right?
Oh, it's going to be the perfect spot.
Right.
And I'll go back, my French friend Jerome Broussard, now he's connected with Preservation Hall. I put him in touch with them. And he is going to now, I think he's going to, instead of going to the museum, I think the hall is going to be a little bit more involved in what he's doing. The Preservation Hall has a foundation that is all about perpetuating, preserving.
That's Craig Lucas, right?
Yep, and moving the music forward.
Well, that's fun. That's a really nice project to be involved with.
Oh yeah. So being part of the Preservation Hall is just a delight and a joy.
Sure. And you are closing, and we'll close with this, that you have been elected a year or two ago to the Preservation Hall of Fame. What is that like for a guy like you that grew up looking in the window to pay his $3 to go? Talk about that feeling. What does it mean?
And it's a legacy. When you reach the age of 60, I guess they decide. And a few years ago, they decided they were going to have a program. And they inducted Leroy Jones and Shannon Powell, and I was Louis Ford and Mark Brooks and myself in that number. And I was so honored to be.
I was there. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was just it was one of the biggest honors, probably better than winning a Grammy.
Whoa!
I'm
You hear that,
just gonna say
people?
that.
That's deep.
I'm going to
deep.
tell you, yeah, because it's further back. My history is further back with that.
The roots of it are just so deep.
Totally deep, and I can see also where my career is not ending, but you know what I'm saying?
But that's a good place to grow old.
Yeah, man. Look, when you're 80 years old, people in orchestras don't last. When they're in their 60s, they train.
Charlie Gabriel's a rock star at 90. How
Charlie
old is he?
Gabriel is 90, going to be 92 in
Charlie
July.
Gabriel, 92-year-old rock star. He gets the biggest applause. You go there.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. So, and the hall always, when I would go to the hall, I would see these musicians, the Humphrey brothers, Willie and Percy. They played till they were 92 and 94 years old.
Amazing.
I played with Lionel Furbos, who was a Creole musician at the Palm Court. He was 100 years old. He lived to 102.
Wow.
So you can, in this traditional world,
can blow.
can still,
You can go.
you can keep your career going.
Wow.
In other genres of music, maybe not so much, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Although,
and last question before we close is, what would be your recommendation for an artist who wants to be in music, and just as far as besides the actual word practice, obviously, which is a big one. I mean, what would be your sense of motivation for the young people today?
getting out there and experiencing music live. This is how we learn. You know, of course, now we have the phone and the computer. We can YouTube everything, but it doesn't fill that space of hearing that live vibration of the music. And as a younger musician, you really should be out there chasing this music around. Like there should be a class here at Loyola, chasing music. You know, here's your assignment. This band's playing here tonight. you go there, and I want to
idea.
see a picture that you were there,
Right.
and tell me what you learned from that performance.
That's good.
Because that's how we're going to learn. That's how we learn. We have to.
Perhaps Jason Mingledorf could teach that class.
We're gonna.
A little bit of something.
I'll
Anyway,
teach
my
that
friend,
class.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you,
in
Jonathan
and
McHugh.
It's a wealth of information and just one of the most renowned musicians in the town, one of the best people. And so we're lucky to have him. And he's a treasure to the community. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Fridays Offbeat.
Thank you.
Great Googa Mooga.